The night sky was burning. The kingdom that once shone with silver towers was now covered in smoke and fire. Screams of the people filled the air as soldiers rushed through the broken gates. The alien princess ran barefoot through the ruined streets, her long gown torn and dirty, holding tightly the small hand of her daughter. The little girl was crying softly, too weak to scream anymore. The princess's face, once proud and noble, was pale with fear and exhaustion. She had lost everything: her throne, her guards, her people. Now only her child remained, and she had sworn to protect her no matter the cost. Behind them, armored soldiers shouted orders. The enemy was searching every corner, every broken wall, hunting for her. She was the last blood of the royal family. If they caught her, both she and her daughter would be used as trophies, broken and displayed before the conquerors. Her heart beat faster with every step, but her body was already weak from hunger and wounds. She could barely stand, yet she pushed herself forward, dragging her daughter with trembling hands. They reached the dark edge of the city, where the broken road met the forest. The princess stumbled but forced herself up again. Her daughter's small voice whispered, "Mama, I'm hungry." The words cut deeper than any blade. Tears blurred her eyes, but she whispered back, "Just a little longer, my child. Just a little longer." She knew she had no food, no safe place. Still, she kept moving, one step after another, through mud and ash. The forest was cold and silent. Branches snapped under their feet, and the princess looked around with fear. Every shadow seemed like an enemy soldier. She knew she couldn't run forever. Her daughter was slowing down, falling behind. The child's feet were bleeding from sharp stones. The princess finally picked her up, though her arms shook from the weight. She stumbled deeper into the forest, trying to silence her own sobs. At last, when her strength almost broke, she saw a small clearing. In the middle stood a figure, tall, broad, wearing simple clothing. Not an armored soldier, not one of her kind. A human. His presence was strange, almost unreal. Humans were rare in her land, spoken of in whispers, creatures of mystery, said to be clever, dangerous, and stubborn. She froze in fear, not sure if he was an enemy or a savior. The human stood silent, watching her approach. His eyes were calm, but sharp, like blades hidden in shadow. The princess's breath caught in her throat. She had no strength left, no allies, no pride. Only her daughter clung to her neck, whimpering softly. Slowly, her knees bent, and she collapsed onto the cold ground before him. Dust rose as she lowered her head, the crown of her hair touching the dirt. She pressed her daughter close to her chest and raised her trembling voice. "Take me," she whispered. Her voice cracked, almost breaking. "I have nothing left. Take me as your concubine. Just spare my child." Her words echoed through the trees, heavy with shame and despair. The princess, who once commanded armies and was bowed to by thousands, now begged at the feet of a man from another world. She lifted her eyes for a moment, seeing the human's expressionless face. He neither smiled nor frowned. His silence was more terrifying than the screams of soldiers. The little girl turned her head and looked at the human with wide, frightened eyes. She did not understand her mother's words, but felt the weight of fear in them. She reached out her tiny hand toward him, as if searching for safety. The human's gaze shifted, not to the princess, but to the child. He crouched slightly, his eyes level with the girl's, studying her as if measuring her soul. The princess felt her chest tighten. She had offered herself in desperation, hoping he would accept and keep the child alive. But now, staring into his cold eyes, she wondered if she had just handed her daughter to another kind of danger. She wanted to scream, to beg again, but no words came. Her throat was dry as sand. The forest grew quiet. Only the crackle of far-off fire and the faint cries of the child broke the silence. The human finally moved. Slowly, he stepped forward. The princess flinched, pulling her daughter back, but he did not reach for her. Instead, he stopped in front of them, tall as a shadow, and simply looked down. His presence was overwhelming, like a mountain standing unshaken in a storm. Her heart pounded. She whispered again, more desperate than before. "Please, she is innocent. Take me, but protect her." Still, no answer. The man's eyes lingered on her face, then on the dirt at her knees, and finally on the trembling hands clutching her daughter. A single moment stretched like eternity. The princess felt she would faint under the weight of that silence. Finally, the human bent down, but not toward her. He reached out and carefully touched the child's arm. The girl gasped but did not pull away. His large hand lifted her gently, setting her on his shoulder. The child blinked in surprise, holding his neck tightly. The princess's breath caught. He had taken the child, but ignored her offer. He had not touched her, not spoken a single word. She remained kneeling on the ground, stunned, watching as her daughter clung to the strange man. In that moment, fear and hope tangled inside her heart. Was this human her salvation, or just another cruel master? The question burned as loudly as the fires behind them. She did not know if she had given her daughter to safety, or into the hands of a creature far more dangerous than her enemies. And as the night wind whispered through the trees, the human finally spoke a single cold word. Why? The princess raised her head, her body trembling, her lips parted to answer. Her fate, and her daughter's, now hung on the human's decision. The human's voice was calm, but it cut through the silence like a blade. His single word, why, lingered in the air. The princess froze, not sure if he wanted an answer or if he was testing her. Her daughter clung to his shoulder, small arms wrapped tightly around his neck, looking more comfortable there than she had in days. The sight made the princess's heart ache. She pressed her hands together and whispered, her voice shaking, "Because she is all I have left. I can lose my crown, my home, even my life, but not her. Please, save her." The human studied her face. His eyes were sharp, but not cruel. It was as if he was searching for something hidden in her words, something deeper than begging. He did not answer quickly. Instead, he shifted the little girl in his arms, holding her steady. The child looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, then buried her face against his chest, as if she had already chosen to trust him. That simple act sent a strange shiver through the princess's heart. He finally asked another question. "Why should I help you?" His tone was flat, almost cold. The princess felt her lips tremble. She wanted to scream at him, to say that he was her only chance, but she forced herself to speak slowly. "Because you are human. They say humans are stubborn and that they protect even strangers. I have nothing left to offer but myself. If you want me, take me. If you want to leave me, then at least protect her." Her voice cracked on the last word, and tears spilled down her cheeks. The human tilted his head slightly, as if her words puzzled him. He looked down at the child again, then back at the princess kneeling in the dirt. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of soldiers shouting in the night. The princess held her breath, waiting for his choice. Instead of answering, he crouched low, setting the girl gently on her feet. He pulled something from his belt, a strip of dried food, and handed it to her. The child sniffed it, then nibbled cautiously, her hungry eyes lighting up. The princess felt her heart twist again. He had ignored her offer of herself, but he had fed her daughter without hesitation. She tried to speak, but a sound behind them made her blood run cold. Voices. Enemy scouts were close, their boots crushing leaves as they moved through the forest. The princess turned her head sharply, panic flashing across her face. The human straightened immediately, his hand resting on a weapon hidden beneath his coat. His calm expression did not change, but his body shifted like a predator preparing to strike. He looked down at her one last time. "Get up," he said quietly. The command was firm, not cruel, but heavy with authority. For a moment, the princess hesitated, confused. Then she obeyed, forcing her legs to carry her trembling body upward. She took her daughter's hand, but the girl was still chewing the food happily, her fear forgotten for a moment. The human motioned with his head, and without another word, he began moving deeper into the forest. The princess followed closely, her heart racing. She had begged him to take her, but he had not accepted. Instead, he had taken responsibility for her child, and in doing so, forced her to follow. Every step felt like a chain binding her to this silent, dangerous man. The scouts' voices grew louder behind them. The human stopped, crouched low, and pulled the princess and child down into the shadow of thick roots. His movements were precise, controlled, as if he had done this many times before. The princess held her breath, clutching her daughter tightly against her chest. Soldiers passed only a few steps away, their torches casting dim light between the trees. One wrong sound, one broken twig, and they would be caught. The little girl whimpered softly, and the princess pressed her hand gently over her mouth, tears streaming silently down her face. She prayed in her heart for the first time in years. The human, beside them, was still as stone. His eyes followed every movement of the scouts, his hand resting firmly on his blade. When the soldiers finally moved past, disappearing into the dark, the human rose quietly and continued walking without looking back. The princess stumbled after him, whispering, "Why did you not leave me behind? You could have gone faster alone." He stopped for a moment, turning his head just enough for her to see his eyes in the moonlight. "Because of her," he said simply, nodding at the child. Then he turned and kept walking. Her heart tightened. She realized the truth. He had not spared her. He had spared her daughter. She was only allowed to stay because the child still needed her mother. A strange mixture of shame and relief filled her chest. She was grateful, but at the same time, it hurt that she was worth nothing in his eyes. Still, as she looked at the broad back of the human moving steadily ahead of them, she felt a flicker of safety she had not felt since her kingdom fell. Hours passed as they traveled through the forest. The human never spoke more than a few words. Spa never explained his plan, never looked back at her. Yet he always walked at a pace she could follow, always made sure the child was safe, and when the girl stumbled, he carried her without complaint. His silence was mysterious, but his actions spoke louder than any oath of loyalty. When dawn finally broke, the princess's legs almost gave out. She had no strength left, but the human finally stopped at a stream. He crouched, filling a flask with water, and handed it first to the child, then to her. She drank greedily, water dripping down her chin, but he said nothing. The princess stared at him, exhausted, confused, and afraid. She whispered softly, "You refuse me, but you protect us. Why?" The human finally looked at her directly. His eyes were unreadable, but his words were clear. "Because no one else will." The princess felt her breath catch. For the first time since her fall, she believed that maybe, just maybe, survival was possible. Yet the question burned in her heart. Was this human truly their savior, or would his mercy come at a cost she had not yet seen? The forest stretched endlessly before them, dark and damp, with heavy branches blocking the light of the rising sun. The princess walked behind the human, her daughter between them, her small hands swinging from side to side. Every sound in the forest made the princess flinch. Every crack of a twig, every distant cry of a bird, every rustle in the bushes. She was still not sure if following this man was safer than surrendering to the soldiers, but she had no choice. Her daughter trusted him already, and the princess knew she could not protect the child on her own. The human moved like a shadow. His steps were silent, his eyes always scanning the ground, the trees, and the path behind them. He seemed to know the land as if it was a map burned into his mind. Once the princess nearly tripped over a root, and before she could fall, his hand caught her arm, steadying her. He released her just as quickly, not even glancing at her, and kept walking. She stared at his back for a moment, her cheeks burning with shame. He was not like the men of her court, who would have mocked her weakness or demanded payment for kindness. His silence was stranger than cruelty. Hours passed. The princess's stomach growled, but she said nothing. Her daughter grew tired and stumbled often, and finally, the child lifted her arms toward the human. Without hesitation, he picked her up and carried her on his shoulder again. The princess watched the girl rest her head against him, her eyes fluttering shut. A sting of jealousy mixed with relief inside her heart. She wanted to be the one to give her daughter comfort, yet the little one seemed safer with this silent man than with her own mother. When the sun was high, the human finally stopped. He crouched down near a cluster of bushes and pulled something from the ground, roots and herbs the princess did not recognize. Then he walked to a fallen tree, took out a small knife, and cut strips of bark, rolling them carefully. The princess frowned. "What are you doing?" she asked softly, unable to keep the question inside. He glanced at her, then simply answered, "Food. Medicine." She felt a wave of embarrassment. In her palace, food had always been served on silver plates by dozens of servants. Now she was eating bitter roots and drinking water from streams. Yet when he gave the pieces to her daughter, the little girl chewed them without complaint, smiling faintly as her hunger eased. The princess forced herself to eat too, grimacing at the taste, but swallowing anyway. It was survival, and he knew it better than she did. As night approached, the forest grew colder. The human led them to a hollow beneath a large rock formation. With swift movements, he gathered dry wood and leaves. The princess thought he would set them ablaze, but instead he built the fire in a way that gave off little smoke. She stared at him, amazed by how carefully he worked. "How do you know all this?" she whispered. He gave no answer, only struck sparks with his knife until a small flame grew. The warmth spread slowly, and the princess held her daughter close, finally feeling a little safer. But the safety did not last long. As the fire crackled, faint sounds reached them, the snapping of twigs, the crunch of footsteps. The princess's blood froze. Enemy soldiers. She could hear their voices, low but clear, moving closer. She clutched her daughter tightly, her heart hammering. The little girl stirred, about to whimper, but the human placed a finger to his lips, his eyes sharp and commanding. The princess pressed her hand gently over her daughter's mouth, rocking her quietly, praying she would stay silent. The human moved like a predator. He picked up a sharp stick, placed it carefully near his side, and loosened the blade at his belt. His eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, calm yet ready to strike. The princess realized then that he was not just a traveler. He was a warrior of some kind, trained and dangerous. The soldiers' torches flickered through the trees. They were close now, close enough that the princess could see their armor glint in the light. Her daughter's body trembled against her, and tears wet her sleeve. The princess closed her eyes, whispering silently to the stars, begging for one more chance. She had offered herself once, but now even that would not matter if they were caught. Suddenly, one of the soldiers shouted, pointing toward the rock formation. The princess's heart stopped. They had seen the faint glow of the fire. The human's hand tightened around his blade. He leaned close to the princess, his voice a whisper, steady and sharp. "Do not move, no matter what happens." Before she could answer, he slipped into the shadows outside the hollow. She clutched her daughter, trying not to scream, listening to the clash of movement beyond the rocks. Metal rang, bodies fell, muffled cries were cut short. The princess's chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes wide with terror. Every sound made her feel as if death was inches away. Then silence. Heavy, final silence. The human reappeared, his blade streaked with blood, his expression unchanged. He wiped the weapon clean on the grass and sat down near the fire again, as if nothing had happened. The princess stared at him, trembling, unable to believe her eyes. He had fought and killed without hesitation, all to keep them safe. Her daughter peeked out from her embrace, blinking at the human. The child's voice was soft, innocent. "Safe, man?" she whispered. The human's eyes flicked toward her, and for the first time, his lips curved slightly, not a smile, but something close. He gave a single nod. The princess's throat tightened. She could not understand him, this man who killed with such cold skill, but treated her daughter with gentle hands. He had rejected her offer, refused her body, but still chose to protect them both. Fear and confusion twisted inside her. She wanted to ask him who he was, why he cared, what he wanted from them, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. The forest wind whistled through the branches, carrying the smell of blood away. The fire flickered, and the little girl curled up between them, drifting into sleep. The princess watched the human in silence, knowing one truth deep in her heart. Her fate was now tied to his, and there was no turning back. The journey had only begun, and with every step, she would learn more about the mysterious man who had taken her daughter's hand and led them both into the unknown. The forest was dark and heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of footsteps moving closer. The princess clutched her daughter, her breath shallow, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see shadows shifting between the trees, the faint glow of torches drawing nearer. The human rose to his feet, calm and steady, as though the danger did not disturb him at all. His eyes narrowed, studying the movement, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. The princess whispered in fear, "They found us." She pressed her daughter's face against her shoulder, trying to shield her eyes from what was about to come. She was sure this was the end. There were too many of them, and the human could not fight them all. Yet the man did not run, did not panic. He stepped forward, placing himself between the princess and the soldiers. The first group of hunters appeared, their armor glinting under the moonlight. There were 6 of them, each taller and stronger than the princess, their alien forms built for war. They grinned cruelly when they saw her, shouting to each other. One raised his spear and pointed at her. "The princess! The reward is ours!" Another laughed. And the child too. We will deliver them to the commander." The princess trembled, pulling her daughter closer, tears burning her eyes. She wanted to beg to offer herself again if only they would spare her little one, but her voice caught in her throat. She turned to the human, expecting him to flee and leave them behind. But he did not move away. Instead, he walked slowly toward the soldiers, his face expressionless, his movements quiet and controlled. The hunters laughed at him. "A human?" one mocked. "Does he think he can stop us?" They lowered their weapons, confident, circling him like predators around prey. The princess shut her eyes, waiting to hear the sound of his death. But what she heard instead was swift, brutal silence. The human exploded into motion. His blade flashed like silver lightning, cutting through the first soldier's throat before the others even realized he had moved. Blood sprayed across the leaves, and the man's body fell without a sound. The others roared in anger, lunging at him with spears and axes. The princess gasped, clutching her daughter tightly, her eyes wide with shock. The human dodged their attacks with precise steps, moving as if he had danced this dance 1,000 times before. He seized one soldier's wrist, twisted it sharply until the bones cracked, and drove his knife into the alien's chest. Another swung a heavy axe, but the human ducked low, swept his leg out, and brought the giant crashing to the ground before stabbing him cleanly through the heart. The forest rang with the sound of steel and screams. The princess could not look away. She had seen battles before, but never like this. Her warriors had always fought with numbers and pride, roaring loudly to strike fear into enemies. But this man fought with silence, with deadly calm. Every move was efficient, every strike fatal. He did not waste a single breath. 3 more soldiers rushed him together, shouting in rage. The human leapt back, then hurled a small metal spike from his belt. It pierced one soldier's throat, and he collapsed, choking. The other 2 pressed on, one swinging wide, the other thrusting forward. The human caught the thrust, twisted the spear away, and used it to stab the attacker through his chest. He then turned the stolen weapon against the last, driving it deep until the soldier's body slumped lifelessly to the ground. The silence returned. Broken bodies lay scattered around him, their lifeblood soaking into the soil. The human stood still, breathing evenly, as though he had not just ended 6 lives. His blade dripped red, but his face remained calm, his eyes cold. He looked back at the princess, and in that moment, she felt a chill run down her spine. Her daughter whimpered, pressing her small face into her mother's dress, too young to understand the horror, but sensing the danger. The princess stroked her hair, whispering softly, trying to calm both her child and herself. She could not believe what she had just seen. 6 armed hunters, stronger and larger than him, had fallen like dry leaves before a storm. And he had fought as if it meant nothing, as if it was routine. The princess's lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to thank him, to ask how he could do such things, but her voice failed her. He did not seem to expect words anyway. He wiped his blade on one of the dead soldiers' cloaks, then slid it back into his belt. His eyes shifted to the trees around them, scanning for more danger. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady and low. "More will come." The princess's stomach tightened. She knew he was right. If scouts had found them, then the rest of the enemy army would not be far behind. She hugged her daughter closer, her body trembling from both fear and awe. This man, this human, had saved them, yet she was more afraid of him than ever. Not because he threatened her, but because she could not understand him. He motioned with his head. "We move. Now." The princess nodded quickly, too shaken to argue. She followed him through the shadows, stepping over the bodies of the soldiers who had hunted her. Every step she took, she felt her world shifting. She had fallen to her knees before him, offering herself in despair, thinking he was her last chance. But now she realized something far more unsettling. He was not a chance. He was a force. As they moved deeper into the forest, her daughter's small voice whispered, "Mama, safe man strong." The princess's throat tightened. She kissed the child's head and glanced once more at the human's back. Safe man, yes, but dangerous too. Perhaps the most dangerous man she had ever met. The night grew colder, but she no longer felt the chill. Her fear had turned into something else, something she could not name yet. She only knew one thing for certain. Wherever this human led them, their fate would never again be the same. The fire burned low, casting soft light on the hollow beneath the trees. The princess sat close to her daughter, wrapping her in a torn cloak, though her eyes never left the human sitting across from them. He was sharpening his blade with slow, careful strokes, his face as unreadable as stone. Blood still stained the edge, but he treated it like nothing more than a tool, not a memory of the lives he had ended. The princess shivered. She could not tell if he was a monster or a savior, but she knew one thing. Without him, she and her child would already be dead. Her daughter's small voice broke the silence. "Safe man," she whispered, her eyes fixed on him with innocent trust. She crawled toward him, clutching a piece of dried bark he had given her earlier. The princess reached out, trying to pull her back, but the child slipped from her grasp. To her shock, the human did not push the girl away. Instead, he paused, lowered his blade, and watched her with quiet eyes. The child smiled, placing the bark in his hand as if it were a gift. "For you." The princess felt tears prick her eyes. Her daughter, who had seen her kingdom burn, who had cried herself to sleep in fear, was now smiling for the first time in days. And it was because of this stranger. The human accepted the gift without a word, tucking it away carefully, as though it mattered. Then, in a rare moment, he spoke. "She is strong." The princess's throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, but her voice shook. "She only has me," she whispered. "She has no father, no family. I thought I could protect her, but I failed." She lowered her eyes, ashamed, her fingers trembling as she stroked her daughter's hair. "That is why I begged you. Even if I must fall lower than dirt, even if I must give myself away, I cannot let her die." The human's gaze lingered on her for a moment. He did not reply right away, and the silence pressed heavily on her heart. At last he said softly, "You did not fail. You kept moving. She is alive." His words were simple, but they pierced through her like light breaking through clouds. For the first time since her fall, she felt the faintest spark of hope. Her daughter yawned and curled up beside the human's leg, her small hands resting on his boot as she drifted into sleep. The princess's heart ached again. She wanted to move the girl, to keep her close, but the child looked peaceful there, as if she trusted him more than anyone else. That trust cut the princess deeply, but it also made her feel safer than she dared admit. The night stretched on, and the forest whispered with hidden dangers. The human did not sleep. He sat still, listening, his blade resting beside him. The princess watched him in silence, her mind filled with questions she could not ask. Who was he? Why did he care for them when he had refused her offer? What did he want? At dawn, he finally stood, waking the girl gently with a touch to her shoulder. "We move," he said simply. The princess followed without protest. As they walked, the little one held his hand, skipping slightly despite her tired legs. The princess walked behind, her thoughts heavy. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a small stream. The human crouched, scanning the ground. His sharp eyes caught tracks in the mud. Soldiers had passed there recently. He turned to the princess. "They hunt harder now. A bounty." Her heart sank. She knew what it meant. The enemy wanted her alive, and they would not stop. Fear twisted inside her, but before she could speak, her daughter tugged the human's arm. "Are we safe?" she asked softly. He crouched down, meeting her eyes, and answered with quiet certainty. "As long as I walk, you are safe." The princess felt her breath catch. His words were meant for the child, but they struck her heart as well. She realized then that he had never promised to protect her, only the little one. She was allowed to live only because her daughter needed her. Shame burned her chest, but strangely, so did gratitude. They continued their journey, avoiding roads and villages, moving through wild paths. Along the way, the human showed skills that amazed her. He built traps that caught small animals, lit fires without smoke, and found hidden paths no one else would have noticed. The princess realized he was not only a warrior, but also a survivor. Her people had called humans weak, yet she had never seen such strength. That night, as the fire flickered low again, she finally gathered the courage to ask, "Why do you risk yourself for us?" "You could have left me to die." The human looked at her steadily, his face unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice firm but quiet. "Because no one else will, and because she should not suffer for your war." Her chest tightened. She thought of her people, of the betrayal, of the nobles who had abandoned her, and of the soldiers who had turned against her. He was right. No one else would have helped, not even those bound by loyalty to her crown. Only this human, who owed her nothing, had chosen to fight for them. Her daughter stirred in her sleep, murmuring his name as she dreamed. The princess watched, her eyes wet with silent tears. She felt small, powerless, but also strangely safe. She did not know what would come tomorrow, but she knew one truth. This man was the only reason her daughter still breathed. The fire crackled, the night stretched on, and the princess sat quietly, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. Her world had crumbled, her throne was gone, but here, in the wilderness, a bond was forming. Not the bond she had offered in shame, but something deeper, built on survival, trust, and unspoken strength. And though she did not dare admit it, she found herself wishing, for the first time, that he would not leave them behind. The morning sky was gray when they reached the edge of a small village. The princess felt a fragile hope rising in her chest. The houses were old and cracked, built from stone and wood, and smoke curled gently from chimneys. Perhaps here they could find shelter, food, even kindness. She tightened her grip on her daughter's hand, whispering softly, "We are safe now, little one." But the human said nothing. His sharp eyes scanned the quiet streets, his jaw set as if he already sensed danger. The villagers noticed them quickly. Eyes peeked from windows and doors opened slowly. Whispers spread through the air, carrying her name like poison. The princess pulled her hood low, trying to hide her face, but it was too late. An old man pointed a crooked finger. "That's her, the fallen princess." Another voice shouted, "There's a reward for her, alive." The whispers turned into shouts, and soon the entire village was watching. The princess's heart dropped into her stomach. She had once been their ruler, a symbol of pride, but now she saw only hatred and greed in their eyes. She clutched her daughter tightly, her body shaking. "Please," she begged the villagers, her voice breaking, "she is only a child. Do not harm her." But her words meant nothing. To them, she was no longer a princess. She was a price. The human stepped forward, placing himself between the crowd and the two of them. His hand rested on his blade, his eyes hard and cold. The villagers hesitated, fear flickering across their faces. But greed was stronger. Several men with farming tools and rusted weapons stepped out, circling slowly. "Give her up, human," one spat. "You can share in the bounty. No need to die for her." The human's silence was sharper than any words. His grip tightened on his weapon, but before he could act, soldiers stormed into the village. The villagers stepped aside quickly, bowing their heads. The commander rode at the front, armored and proud, his eyes gleaming with victory when he saw her. "So," he said mockingly, "the lost princess comes crawling to peasants. How far you have fallen." The princess's knees weakened, but she held her daughter tighter. "Please," she whispered, "let her go. She is innocent." The commander dismounted, circling her like a predator. His cruel smile widened. "You beg well, princess. Perhaps I will let her live, if you kneel and swear yourself to me." Tears blurred her vision. For her child's life, she would do anything. She sank to her knees, her head bowed, shame burning through her. "I swear. Just let her live." The commander laughed, pleased with her humiliation. The human's eyes darkened as he watched, his fists clenched, but the soldiers outnumbered him 10-1. The soldiers seized the human roughly, beating him down with clubs and chains. He fought fiercely, but there were too many. They slammed him into the dirt, blood running down his face, his hands bound in iron. The princess cried out, reaching toward him, but a soldier struck her down. Her daughter screamed, struggling against rough hands, shouting his name over and over. The commander dragged the princess up by her hair, forcing her to look at the human chained before them. "Is this your protector? This weak creature? You gave yourself to him?" His voice was full of scorn. The princess's heart broke at the sight of the man who had saved them so many times, now bloodied and helpless. In desperation, she tried again to bargain. "Please, I will be yours. I will give myself to you. Just spare them." Her voice cracked, her pride shattered completely. The commander sneered, gripping her chin. "You already belong to me. You have nothing left to offer." His laughter echoed through the village, cruel and loud. The human lifted his head slowly, blood dripping from his mouth. His eyes locked on hers, burning with fury. For a moment, she thought he hated her, for kneeling, for begging, for offering herself to another man. Shame crushed her chest, and she looked away, unable to bear his gaze. The soldiers dragged him to the center of the village, chaining him to a post. The child's cries grew louder, her small arms reaching desperately toward him. "Safe man!" Safe man! Her screams tore through the air, and the princess's tears fell like rain. She had failed again. She could not save her child, nor the man who had risked everything for them. The villagers gathered, eager to see the spectacle. Some shouted for his death, others for the princess to be paraded in chains. The commander raised his hand, silencing them. At dawn, we will deliver them to the capital. Let all see the broken princess and her pet human. The princess collapsed to the ground, her body trembling. She clutched her daughter close, whispering apologies through her sobs. The child, however, kept calling for the human, refusing to stop, her voice raw with desperation. The princess pressed her forehead to the dirt, praying silently, though she no longer knew if anyone listened. The human, bloodied and bound, did not lower his head. His eyes burned with defiance, fixed on the commander, on the soldiers, on the villagers who betrayed them. He did not speak, but the fire in his gaze was stronger than any words. Even in chains, he looked dangerous, unbroken. The princess dared to meet his eyes again, her lips trembling. I am sorry, she whispered so softly that only she could hear it. She thought he would look away, but he did not. He kept staring, and in his silence, she felt a promise. The soldiers dragged her and her daughter to a separate cage, locking them inside. The iron bars were cold and heavy, sealing their fate. The little girl sobbed, reaching her hand through the bars toward the chained human. The princess held her close, rocking her gently, though her own tears would not stop. The night was long, filled with the sound of guards laughing and the faint cries of her child. The princess sat against the bars, staring at the human across the square. Even beaten, even chained, he looked unshaken. Something in her heart told her this was not the end. He would not die so easily. But fear gnawed at her. What if she was wrong? What if dawn brought only death and humiliation? She closed her eyes, pressing her lips to her daughter's hair, whispering, "Forgive me." And in the silence of her despair, the human's gaze never left her, a silent fire promising that the story was not yet over. The cold dawn crept over the village, painting the broken houses in gray light. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the crackling of torches and the faint murmur of soldiers preparing to march. The princess sat inside the iron cage, her daughter clinging to her chest, both of them exhausted from crying through the night. Across the square, the human stood chained to the post, his body bruised and bloodied, but his eyes still sharp and burning. Even in defeat, he looked unbroken. The princess could not stop staring at him, her heart twisting with fear and guilt. The commander stepped forward, proud and cruel. He lifted his hand to the soldiers and announced, "Today we march to the capital. The princess and her bastard child will be displayed, and this human beast will be executed before the crowd." The villagers cheered, hungry for gold and glory. The princess felt her stomach turn, bile rising in her throat. She buried her daughter's face against her shoulder, whispering softly, "Don't listen, my love. Don't be afraid." The commander approached her cage, his armor clinking as he walked. He crouched low, smiling coldly through the bars. "Last chance, princess? Swear yourself to me, and I may let your daughter live." The princess trembled, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to say yes, to sacrifice herself again, but before she could speak, a low voice cut through the air. "No!" It was the human. His voice was calm, quiet, but it carried across the entire square like thunder. Every soldier turned to look at him. The commander sneered, striding toward him. "What did you say, worm?" The human lifted his head, his eyes blazing with fury. "She belongs to no one, not you, not me, not anyone. Touch her or the child, and I will kill you." His words sent a chill through the crowd. Even in chains, even beaten and surrounded, his voice carried the weight of a promise. The prince's breath caught, her chest aching. Her daughter lifted her head and whispered, "Safe man," as if she believed completely in him. The commander laughed, mocking him. "You kill me? You're finished, human." He raised his hand to strike, but in that moment, the human moved. With a sudden roar, he twisted his bound arms, and the iron chains snapped against the post. Gasps filled the air as he lunged forward, seizing the commander by the throat. The soldiers rushed in, but he was faster, fiercer. His blade, stolen from a fallen guard, flashed in the air. Blood sprayed as men screamed and collapsed one after another. The village erupted into chaos. The princess clutched her daughter tightly, her eyes wide with shock and awe. The human was unstoppable. Every strike was precise, brutal, fueled by rage and unshakable will. The soldiers who had mocked him hours ago now trembled before him, their courage broken. He fought like a storm, cutting through them until the ground was slick with blood. The commander tried to flee, but the human caught him, dragging him down by his armor. The man screamed, begging for mercy, but there was none. The human's blade struck, ending his life in one final, brutal motion. Silence fell, broken only by the heavy breathing of the man who now stood victorious, surrounded by the dead. The princess pressed her face against the bars of the cage, tears streaming down her cheeks. She could not believe what she had witnessed. One man, alone, had destroyed an entire unit. He was no ordinary human. He was something else, something terrifying, something glorious. He turned toward her, his chest heaving, his body streaked with blood. For a moment, she feared he would look at her with anger, remembering how she had begged the commander for mercy. But when his eyes met hers, they were steady, fierce, and filled with something she had not expected: protection. He strode to the cage and ripped the lock free with his bare hands. The door swung open, and the princess stumbled out, clutching her daughter. She fell to her knees before him, her head bowed. "I am yours," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not as a concubine, not as a slave, but because you are the only man worthy. You saved her. You saved me. I cannot deny it." Her daughter reached out, small arms wrapping around his neck. "Safe, man," she murmured, burying her face against him. The human lifted her gently, holding her with surprising softness, despite the blood on his hands. Then he looked down at the princess, still kneeling in the dirt. "You don't kneel to me," he said firmly. His voice was rough but steady. He reached out, taking her by the arm and pulling her to her feet. "Stand. Protect her with me. From now on, no one touches either of you." The princess's tears fell harder, but her heart was lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, she did not feel broken. She felt safe. She felt strong, because she stood beside him. The villagers watched in silence, fear and awe in their eyes. None dared move. None dared speak. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. A single human had destroyed an army and carried a prince's fate in his hands. The princess looked at them, then at the bodies scattered across the square. For the first time, she felt no shame. She had fallen. Yes, but now she had risen again, not as a queen of a lost throne, but as a woman who had found her protector, her warrior, her future. The human carried the child and motioned for her to follow. Without looking back, he led them out of the village, leaving the stunned villagers to whisper of what they had seen. The princess walked beside him, her hand brushing against his arm, her heart racing with every step. As the forest swallowed them again, her daughter giggled softly, resting against his shoulder. The princess whispered, almost too softly to hear, "From this day, I will never fear again." The human did not answer, but his presence spoke louder than any words. He had given her and her daughter more than life. He had given them hope. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one truth was clear. So long as he walked with them, no enemy, no army, no kingdom would ever break them again.